Hello, my friends. This is Deepak Chopra again, and we are continuing our conversations with luminaries, scientists, sages, and anyone who is helping us improve the human condition. It is my distinct pleasure to speak today to Dr. Carlos Warter. He's an MD, a very interesting career in consciousness, healing, and everything that we talk about on these channels. So, Carlos, first of all, thank you for joining us. Very grateful to have you. I think for our audience, it'll be good if you give a brief history about your career. Let's start with that, and then we'll go deeper.
Okay, I was born in Chile, and I went to medical school in Santiago, always with the intention of seeing the global picture. And I found that the closest place I could was in psychiatry, that supposedly was going to look at mind and body, but my expectation was mind, body, and soul, given some mystical experiences I'd had in my early years. I went to Harvard, did a training in a residency, and then went to Colorado and got boarded also in family practice. All of that didn't add up, so I spent 7 years of my life in Morocco, living with Sufis, in the jungle of South America, Brazil, and Peru, and Colombia, working with shamans and joining their community, and finally with His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala in India. And all of that gave me an awareness that what I had experienced and what I knew within myself was matched by all these spiritual traditions. So I went back to South America, and I began transformation of consciousness seminars, which reached a big population, both in South America, in Nepal, in India, and later in the States. For all of that, I also started a foundation that later was called the World Health Foundation for Development and Peace, which got the Messenger of Peace Award in 1987. And in 89, I was knighted for the public service I had done by the Order of Malta. From then on, I have been living in the States, in different places, currently in the San Diego area, where I live in a very beautiful retreat place, where I hold my retreats and where I write. I've published about 27 books in 10 languages. And well, that's a summary of where I've been standing in the last 50 years.
So as you know right now, in science, the so-called standard model is kind of in trouble. The fact that we don't know why the Big Bang happened, when it happened, why not earlier, why not later. No cause can be ascribed to the Big Bang. There's cosmic inflation, which is very precise. Had it not been so precise, the universe would not be fine-tuned for life and mind. There are no laws of physics in the Planck epoch. And then, of course, 70% of the universe is dark energy, and 27% dark matter. Only 3% of the universe is atomic. Of that, only 0.01% is visible. The rest is interstellar dust. So we have 2 trillion galaxies, 700 sextillion stars, uncountable trillions of planets. And that's 0.01% of what we think is out there. And the trouble with that is, of course, that atoms and particles, when they're not observed, they evolve into waves of possibility which have no location in space-time. So I'm summarizing the problems with the current model, even though it does work for creating technology and everything else. But there are problems, and as a result, the conversation has deepened. What is fundamental reality? Is it matter, or is matter just a concept for a perceptual activity in human consciousness? Because our perceptual activity gives us a particular look of the world, and which is species specific. So, this whole idea of naive realism is being questioned dualism doesn't work. Material monism seems to be in trouble. So what's left is what we might say is consciousness only monism as the non-dual reality that differentiates, into different modes of knowing different aspects of the universe. Given your background in consciousness studies, where do you see yourself in this whole debate right now that is actually becoming part of our mainstream conversation?
Well, this has been my awareness for a long time. And last night I was reading a science magazine which says maybe the Earth has an intelligence of its own, which gave me laughter because for 500 years we have been reducing everything to our convenience. And this reductionism has led to a separation of consciousness and manifestation. And this separation that is in part created by ourselves needs to be reversed to an understanding that reality is created by our perception at the most subtle and subtle level. And I use that in my therapeutic process to see where do we in fear that certain particles will orient themselves in a way that we would call disease and we would call health. And as a matter of fact, modifying that from our own perception brings about healing. And I bear witness to that very personally. When we see this reality as a playground to manifest in one direction or another, or to absorb whatever has been manifested automatically into a way of saying, I can use this as a spiritual exercise, for lack of a better word, in order to restore wholeness. Not that I restore wholeness, but wholeness is already restored.
That's beautiful. So I like this expression, the playground of manifestation. So consciousness is basically manifesting as a playground for all kinds of manifestation, including physical manifestations, biological healing, non-local dormant potentials like psychic phenomena, premature cognition of past and future, possibly lifetimes, on and on. But something that the shamanic traditions, which you're so familiar with, and Sufi traditions, and Vedanta and Kashmir Shaivism has emphasized. So talk to me a little bit about the mechanics of manifestation, if you will.
I think we come into this world with a history. The history is our history. The story of what has happened before we took this particular form. And these sanskaras, as you would say in the Vedanta tradition, inflict a filter of perception and a filter of action that we need to resolve. How do we resolve it? Consciously or unconsciously. If we resolve it consciously, we embark on a route of light, in a route of the perceiver that will illuminate the situations in order to dissolve them so that the emotional manifestations will not have such a tremendous effect. If we do it unconsciously, it still manifests itself because it's part of our background of obviousness. And therefore, we suffer under these conditions. And as we suffer under these conditions, we look for solutions instead of dissolutions. Solutions is trying to solve a problem by finding a technique or a methodology that can bring about a clearing. Dissolution is understanding that we have that power by observation, as you were saying before, that we create our realities through the power of observation, which are quantum physics narratives that have been already accepted, but not accepted inwardly. They have been accepted as phenomena that we look outside of ourselves, but this can be reversed into ourselves, and then we dissolve that which is a hindrance for a satisfactory manifestation of being. What is a satisfactory manifestation of being? I think the best word to call it is love. When we recognize, I love you because I recognize the same consciousness that is within me, that is within you, then a unified field takes place. And I know that Einstein didn't come to the conclusion of what the formula for a unified field is, because it is, as in the Kabbalistic tradition, is called the Yechidah, the unity of the lower levels of soul, being the lower levels of soul, the physical, chemical, the emotional, sensorial, the breathing, the spirit, as we call it, the consciousness of ongoingness, and the joy. 4 elements that need to come together into unified field.
Yes. So, Tagore, the great Indian poet, said, love is not a mere sentiment, it's the ultimate truth at the heart of creation, meaning that seer and scenery, observer and observed, lover and beloved, knower and known are actually the same being, being perceived from different perspectives, but actually the same being. We are the same, just like a stem cell differentiates into all the organs and tissues of the body. So to one being differentiates into species-specific knowers, modes of knowing, and things known all within itself, totally self-organized, self-contained, self-evolving, and self-regulating, which would be totally not consistent with what we understand Darwinian evolution to be. When I look at the Milky Way galaxy or a star out there, what I'm actually experiencing are qualities of my own perception and my own consciousness. And then, this combination of qualia, I say, is out there as a projection. But as John Wheeler said, there's no out there. There's only in here, which is both the inner world and the outer world, differentiated from the same unknowable, infinite, formless, without cause, timeless, spaceless, fundamental reality. Would that be your take as well?
Absolutely. And I'd like to give you a little example. I was sitting in my front yard, and instead of looking at the beautiful trees that are there, I was looking at the space in between the branches. And suddenly I look out, or what we call out, and I feel that I am a passenger in this fantastic trip that is the Earth and the cosmos all together, going on a direction that I don't precisely know where it is going, but I know it is going, and I am a fundamental passenger of it.
And just like that space between the leaves or the branches is the same space between thought, between breath, between you and me, between every sensation, every perception, every idea. Would you say that's what the ancients called Chitakash?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with animals, with birds, with dogs that I have here, with trees, with leaves, with everything, one unified field that allows me mercifully to observe it.
So I believe you have a book coming out soon. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, I am working with a book that will be called Psychiatry, Psychedelics, and the Human Promise. Psychiatry, we know what it has entailed. I call it negative psychiatry because instead of looking at the infinite potential of possibilities of a human being that comes to one's office, people are trained to look at what the problem is, focusing on the problem. And don't get me wrong, sometimes medications work, sometimes psychotherapy works, but the vision of how we hold the other person works better. Then psychedelics, which now are being researched again. I belong to a generation that we still use them. I trained in medical school the use of psychedelics in 1970. And then they were mystified and street and condemned and demonized, and suddenly there is a renaissance. Problem I see with the renaissance, it is being medicalized. And now psychedelics fall into the big pharma possibility, and this treats this. Ketamine is good for depression, and MDMA will be approved next year for PTSD. And that is not what, for me, it is all about. So I am focusing on the human promise. And the human promise is what we've been talking before, what you have been saying, what I've been accepting in this position that we are human beings. Human beings are majestic. Human beings have infinite possibility of discovery of self and others, of discovery of the universe. And sometimes, not always, if the student is ready, the psychedelic can also work to open that consciousness. And when it opens that consciousness, we realize we are what is called divine beings, what every sacred scripture has pointed. When you were saying, I'm the lover and the beloved, I'm the knower and the known, I am the A and the Z. And when a person discovers that, I call it a recontextualization takes place. And this recontextualization is what I feel needs to be promoted these days, so that we don't have new medicines called psychedelics, but we have human beings acquiring their potential.
As you may or may not know, I also actually went to medical school in the 60s. I went to medical school in India from 64 to 69, came to the United States in 1970. I was part of some of the original psychedelic experiments with LSD, etc. So I followed the whole, history of psychedelics and how they're coming back. And also, being physicians, we also look at the medical applications, which I see no harm in. But I totally agree with you that psychedelics have the capacity to open up our infinite potential. And I just wanted to get some ideas from you. You look at these different psychedelics, whether it's ketamine or MDMA or psilocybin. They all seem to have slightly different mechanisms. It is now theorized that a lot of them work through neurotransmitters, or accentuate what we might call the activity of serotonin-like substances. But the bigger picture is also, in my mind, the fact that they decrease the activity of the default mode network, which is supposedly the neural correlate of our ego. And I personally feel now, after a lot of thinking about this, and actually having sat in some sessions with people who have terminal illness and some people who have what is called terminal lucidity, where they see, non-local domains and etc., that probably what psychedelics are doing is revising, you said, recontextualizing our reality and moving away from the editing of our reality as a result of constructs, either social constructs or scientific constructs or religious constructs or mythical constructs that have existed now for 40,000 years. And some of them are useful constructs, latitude, longitude, Greenwich Mean Time, money. But it's still the human universe that we construct. And what psychedelics do is they deconstruct that, so we can see that the universe that we are experiencing is our construction, but behind that is a field of infinite possibilities, what you're calling the unified field. Tell me a little bit how you interpret the various modes of action of what psychedelics are doing, because I don't think it's one thing.
It depends. First of all, let's say that we are not the discoverers of psychedelics, that if we look at caves of thousands and thousands of years ago, we can see drawings of psilocybin mushrooms. We can see that in the indigenous tradition, or what we call the indigenous tradition, I don't know how to call them, the original people tradition, initiations happened at a certain age. I was in the jungle, and I would see how teenagers, when they became men, because they're not considered teenagers in that culture, they're either children or they're men, are brought into a realm of, let's say, man with man, and given certain substances that will do exactly what you were saying. They will deconstruct the living in the jungle as a child and given them the possibility to find a new name that has with the function that in the vision of the psychedelics or the entheogenic, better said, experience, the generation of a divine experience will be called so and so. And then the function, we speak about vocation in our culture. I'm sorry.
No problem.
That's Alexa talking alone. The functions that an individual will take on, that in our culture is skewed because we try to fill into something that society allows a job. There, it is a mission, it is a vocation, a vocare, an inspiration that comes from within. And as it comes from within, this, so to speak, entheogenic experience will determine the life of an individual. We are missing that. Whether it's a serotonin derivative or a dopamine control or any other non-known glutamate or aspartate molecule that we're slowly discovering in our laboratories, there is something bigger than. The Muslims say reality is greater. Yes, reality is greater. And in this greatness, we need to discover what we are all about. And I've found working with adults in places that where this is not allowed, that in experimental settings, you were saying in near-death moments, but also in near-life moments, because most people are living a death instead of living a life. The love of life needs to be awakened. And when it is awakened, everything falls into place. And that's been my experience with thousands and thousands of people in which presented this possibility. They literally wake up. And they wake up, you know, in my own personal experience, let me tell you, in the early 70s, I was part of many research in South America where we were doing that totally legally. The University of Chile had a department of psychedelic research. And then I said, I have acquired very beautiful states. Let me now spend years. And for 12 years, I tried nothing. And in meditation, was able to approach those particular states of consciousness so as not to acquire the cause of it to a substance, whether it's a fruit, a plant, or a chemical, but to the potential that is within inside of each one of us and a duty to facilitate.
That's beautifully said, Carlos. So right now you are located in California, right? And you conduct retreats as well, live, and also do you do workshops online, etc.? Okay. And when do you think your book will be coming out?
That is a question that I cannot answer because we're in the process of now editing the construct of the book. We have the purpose, we have some sample chapters, and we have the outline that goes from the personal transition to the social transition of this field. My focus, as I said before, is not the psychedelic. My focus is the human promise. And I'm not attached that it has to be through psychedelics or through meditation or through grace. One of my older books that was called Pathways to the Soul, I wrote 101 techniques to open the heart. And people said, why 101? I said, because no publisher wanted to publish 7 billion pages. Everybody has their own path. I don't speak about one path. I speak, let me help somebody, let me help myself find the path in which I'm the most natural.
That's so beautiful. Well, this has been a very fascinating conversation. I would love to see anything you want to share with me on psychedelics, if you want my feedback or any other material, but look forward to continuing our dialogue in the future. Thank you very much for joining me.
The honor.